Institutions are essential parts of any society. Think about it. Police stations, schools, hospitals, businesses like Walmart and Trader Joe's are all core parts of a community. In a sense, they impose structure on how individuals behave.
C'est un message à la France. C'est un message pour chaque missile tombé sur nos femmes.
Institutions are important, and so we have placed them on the pure white pedestals atop mountains of confetti. Why? They are large, they are powerful,
Huge problem. The huge problem. That is a huge problem.
and they have been around for as long as we can remember. We have grown complacent. We are afraid to question them. In this video, we are going to do just that with the biggest and the baddest of these institutions, the UN, IMF, the World Bank, WTO, and NATO. We are going to see what results does power without accountability yield.
The biggest and baddest of them all is the United Nations. It's an intergovernmental organization established in 1945 after the Second World War with the twin objectives of promoting international peace and cooperation as well as preventing another world war. Well, at least that's what it was supposed to be.
Allahu Akbar.
Syria. Bangladesh.
Show the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people,
Tibet.
of exhaustion and hunger,
Rwanda. 70 years and $500 billion later, the UN is today reduced to an underfunded bureaucratic labyrinth and a puppet in the hands of a few powerful nations. Who, you ask?
Bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we rise.
No, not Beyonce, but
the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, France, the People's Republic of China, and the United States of America.
just like medieval times, after World War II, the victors kept the spoils, which in this case meant a permanent seat in the Security Council and the right to veto.
This is Sparta!
What this means is that these countries have a ridiculous amount of power to bully their way to self-promoting policies and strike down anything that even slightly annoys
That's the
them.
most persistent fly I've ever seen.
One way in which this power is exhibited is through their peacekeeping operations, which their own website proclaims as one of the most effective tools available to the UN to assist host countries navigate the difficult path from conflict to peace.
Or a white dove. And peace is certainly more than a celebrity endorsement.
While we might be inclined to imagine a rosy picture of these operations owing to Mr. Clooney's charming salt and pepper hair, the actual picture is much more twisted. The UN's fucked up moral relativism is never more apparent than in its peacekeeping operations. Where and when the UN will intervene is heavily dependent on public opinion, which is known to be severely volatile and prone to manipulation. Here comes the role of the American media, or as others like to call it, the world media. In its clever portrayals of supposed public sentiment, it effectively sways the United Nations to use its resources to conduct operations right where the bald eagle wants them to, and in doing so, furthers the United States' interests.
Enemy of the people. Because they have no sources, they just make them up when there are none.
The UN has thus proven to be one of the United States' best investments. And when it doesn't cooperate with the US, they go ahead and do what they want anyway. One need only look at the events of Iraq to see this phenomenon in glorious action. Looking at this, it would be easy to write the UN off as a bloated, shameful den of dictatorships. And yet, the UN has helped save millions from all kinds of hell. From the deepest of poverty, from watching their children die of treatable diseases, from starvation and exposure as they fled wars made in the cauldron of air-conditioned diplomacy. The former UN Secretary General, Dag Hammarskjöld, said it best. But what we need to ask ourselves is, how long will we allow the US to define who, where, and what constitutes hell?
IMF and the World Bank. We are looking at these two influential arms of the UN together as their sister institutions and were made to complement each other. While the IMF is a banking institution which lends money as support to economies in trouble usually, the World Bank mostly aids development projects throughout the world. That is hardly the entire story though. We shall have a look at a small media portal.
Economies. The IMF is one of several global banks that provides loans to troubled economies to promote a stable world economy. The IMF and its sister organization, the World Bank, tend to serve more Western interests, like the US and the EU, while other global banks, like the New Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, serve Chinese and Russian interests more. In total, the IMF has 188 member states.
And now the World Bank.
But many have alleged that these projects often hurt the poor rather than help them. According to a 2015 investigative report, nearly 3.5 million people have been displaced over the last decade to make room for World Bank-funded projects. The organization has rules for so-called involuntary resettlement, ensuring that families are not forced from their homes without warning, and that those who are evicted are safely resettled elsewhere.
Safely resettled elsewhere. Well, this is how these two institutions are portrayed by most of mainstream media, and as a consequence, consumed by most people. Mainstream media adopts pseudo-inclusivism and pretends to present both sides of the argument equally. They will usually say something like, these institutions have been criticized on XYZ points, but will cover it up immediately afterwards with a placating statement so that the blame is shifted, trivialized, or countered. In the case of IMF and the World Bank, they are accused of serving Western interests and being overall failures. But the following counters or the variants are usually used by the media immediately afterwards. A. Their conception was with good intentions. Sure it was, although there is no way to prove that, but let us assume that they were conceptualized by saintly governments after the Second World War. Let us look at what they've been up to recently. A trail of misery. Human rights violations in Kenya, Ethiopia, and India, and so on. Economic trouble in Ukraine, Zambia, and Benin, to name a few. The second argument that is used is that the world would be worse off without them. Maybe, maybe not. It is sketchy. Though this can't be directly quantified, these institutions have done more harm than good in a lot of situations. By attaching a lot of conditions to their deals with the third world countries, these institutions often open up local markets to Western multinationals and absolutely annihilate any government support to local industries. You know the rest. Mass displacement, environmental degradation, economic disparity in developing countries, etc., etc. The third argument is that they serve Western interests, but that's okay because Western countries are the major stakeholders in these organizations. Well, that's no excuse. If these institutions proclaim to be the eradicators of poverty and propellers of global development, this argument makes absolutely no sense. And the last, and a favorite of media's, the blame is siphoned on to the governments. Because these institutions usually work in tandem with the governments, when things go wrong, they shift the blame to the governments and the local authorities. Easy and very effective. Now, the media does report on these institutions, as is evident. In the West, media usually favors them, with the exception of some media companies like Huffington Post, The Guardian, and some NGOs. However, in India, the situation is quite surprising. Even though our unfair treatment by the IMF during 1991 liberalization reforms and the recent displacement due to the dam building, the Indian media is very dispassionate and neutral over these two institutions. The follies of IMF and the World Bank have been exposed, but what is more elusive is the full extent of their motivation behind such activities. Yes, they open up easy markets for the multinationals at the expense of local businesses. But is that it? The media virtually does not report on any geopolitical motivations at all. Only speculations remain.
Representatives from the World Bank have said they're looking for better ways of achieving their goals. So while the bank remains a noble entity working to end global poverty, it seems it has its own problems to fix as well.
Noble entities, indeed.
Moving on to the World Trade Organization, the WTO has been the primary trade arm of the United Nations and a massive institution in itself. Established in 1994 via the Marrakesh Conference, it has had an eventful existence.
The agreements signed today have brought into being a World Trade Organization, a new energy source for the world economy, one which will charge the economic and political links among nations with a new vitality and a new hope. More than just a trade agreement, this is an agreement for global cooperation, based on the recognition that our common human interests transcend our diversity.
Moving away from noble intentions to crude realities, the WTO has been an utter failure as far as correcting trade inequities go, and even more so when it comes to institutionalizing a sense of balance in the heavily skewed global trade edifice is concerned. Here's an exhibit of one of their own men speaking for one among their many failures.
I think it's no use beating around the bush. This meeting has collapsed. Members have simply not been able to bridge their differences. I had hoped to come today with good news. The good news would mean that
developing nations are made to feel shortchanged with every major decision taken, and nobody except the same old 5 permanent members, the victors over Germany and Japan, remember? Holding the whip hand through vetoes and exhibiting hegemony with a flair none can mimic. The global media, dominated by the United States, has often been complicit in relegating major fuck-ups by the World Trade Organization to the fringes by denying it coverage. Severe trade restrictions, especially affecting the exporting capacities of developing nations, for example, be it unilateral imposition of import tariffs by the advanced economies or idiosyncratic labor rulings, it's a failure and hypocrisy galore.
What is NATO? That's actually a complicated question. The simplistic answer is that it's a defensive military alliance. A more complicated one is that it's the cornerstone of American power projection.
Moving on to the NATO, another of those military alliances which has taken to the skin of an institution without much effort. Formed as a counter to the growing influence of the USSR, the NATO remains, although its race in the author is long gone. When we speak of NATO nations, like most other global institutions, it's the US which is comfortably in the driving seat when it comes to unbridled control of actions and resources, alongside Turkey being a major influence as well of late. Be it the hypocrisy exhibited by the P5 leading to the decimation of Muammar Gaddafi once he was found to be effete in serving their interests, with no due care to what impact it could have on the Libyan people.
Mr. Corbett, what is your assessment of how Gaddafi's brutal end was portrayed by some of the world's major news channels?
Well, sadly, I don't think it's very surprising how it was portrayed. indictment of the Western media, but again, it's not really surprising to people who saw, for example, the way that Osama bin Laden's death was portrayed in the Western media as just an opportunity for, I guess, crass celebration rather than any type of introspection or soul searching. And of course, in the Libyan instance, it's even more apparent just the hypocrisy behind it. This supposed humanitarian intervention that was supposedly about,
or be it the cultivation of opium by the US forces in Afghanistan. Hypocrisy and sheer bias in coverage for all to see.
The US-led war on drugs in Afghanistan has been ongoing since the fall of the Taliban in 2001, and despite millions of dollars being spent on destroying crops, Afghanistan remains the world leader in opium poppy production. But as RT's Laura Emmett discovered, the crackdown is having an adverse effect, with countries like the US now forced to grow their own poppies to plug a shortage in pharmaceuticals.
In the rolling fields of Oxfordshire at this time of year, you'll probably see wheat or barley ripening for the harvest, but dry springs and warm summers have enabled these farmers to plant a very different type of crop, opium.
Global media remains an ambivalent spectator at large, as usual, to all these glaring fallacies. And with the new Trump regime hardening its rhetoric against this institution, let's just believe in one saying, that the more things change, the more they remain the same.
They've tried low-interest loans. They've tried zero-interest loans. These companies,
some of these things aren't going to get through the World Trade Organization. There's a lot of these.
Doesn't matter. Then we're going to renegotiate, or we're going to pull out. These trade deals are a disaster, Chuck. The World Trade Organization is a disaster.
These are the most powerful organizations in the world, run by the most powerful countries in the world. They naturally hold staggering influence in the world media and can pull strings around to save themselves from bad light. These institutions are powerful, so powerful that they can help solve global problems such as poverty and conflict. Yet media, instead of acting as a check on the misuse of this power, is acting as an enabler. The solution lies in the media foraying into the realm of truth for once, rather than the pursuit of economic gain.